Good evening. Welcome to Ridgecrest Talk, the Thursday night version with my host or co-host,
Robert
Eierman, and myself, Al Huey. We want to welcome Eierman, China Lake, and Crumville. What? Some of you that are new around here don't know that Ridgecrest used to be called Crumville. And our guest we have tonight, I think he was elected to the school board around when it was still Crumville. I don't know, but we tried to find somebody with experience that we could talk to on from the school board, and all we could find was Mr. Bill Ferris. He only has soon to be 28 years on the school board, but he's very knowledgeable about our schools, and he's also on committees at the state. So we want to welcome you to Ridgecrest Talk this evening, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's been going on in our local schools, say, for the last 3 or 4 years?
Well, I think right now, if you wanted to describe the most prominent issue, I would say it's change. Over this last couple of years, I've got a lot going on. The model for funding education in the state of California has changed. The way of presenting instruction is changing. What we are comparing to in the way of our change to Common Core is changing. And we've had significant change at our administrative levels in our district. Our longtime superintendent, Ms. Joanna Rummer, retired. And so we had to replace her, and we replaced her with a local boy, and Mr. Ernie Bell. And when we did that, it caused a domino effect, and we had change in our personnel, assistant superintendent personnel, and then change at the high school principalship, and change at some of the elementary school principalships, and the junior high that just really created a significant move. And
not to mention that the school board is going through some change.
The school board is going through some change as well, and not just through the election process. Our school district several years ago chose to reduce from a 7-member board to a 5-member board. And we've done it over the process of the 2 election cycles. Last election we reduced to a 6-member, and this election we'll reduce further to a 5-member. So change there, and of course we have an election coming up as well, so that creates additional change in membership as well as the size of the board.
Now, you mentioned Common Core. As I understand, that's only affecting 2 subject matters, right? Math and English?
It is.
And this is the first year, right?
It is the first year, but it is an implementation process that's pretty broad, and it has a significant difference in focus and intent. And I think that's the thing that people need to hold up in front of them to understand what the motivation is. And I know there's a significant amount of discomfort simply by the fact that this is driven by the federal government.
Right.
And from that perspective, I agree that the way our system of education is set up, local school districts should have the authority and the ability to determine what exactly is best for their students, and to make a determination based on that. So it's kind of unsettling that it's pushed specifically from the federal level. There are many who believe that they really don't have an appropriate place in the process, but they do hold the purse strings on a lot of dollars, and so there tends to be that process of if we're going to give you money, we're going to have a specific say in how those dollars are spent.
Well, we'll get back to Common Core a little bit later this evening, but how is enrollment in the local schools and test scores?
Well, enrollment in our schools, it looks like this year it's maybe settling out a little bit. We've been on the decline, for a number of years now. We were at one time knocking on the door of 7,000 students, and we're now like about 4,800. So over the years, there's been a significant reduction in students in our schools, and it's hard to know exactly how much that is a reflection of what's going on in our community, as well as part of it is what's going on in education, in public education, in that there are other options now for students that didn't used to be.
Mm-hmm.
There are online options. There are a lot more options of other types of charter schools and those kinds of things that affect the Sierra Sands Unified School District. But
now, does that number include homeschool and/or charter school and/or
the number that I gave you is people who are enrolled in Sierra Sands.
Okay.
So it does not include homeschools or other charter schools or online schools and that kind of thing. It's our district enrollment. But it looks like this year, at first enrollment, it looks like we're actually settling out about the same, a little higher than this time last year, which is the first year in a number of years that's the case. So that's an encouraging.
Okay, how about the test scores?
Test scores have been very strong. We have been improving on a regular basis. Many of our schools are either right at the 800 level or knocking on the door. Now, having said that, you have to understand that the whole testing model is changing. So we won't be able to compare to our previous years. Both what's being tested and how it's being tested is going to be different. So you're going to see some significant changes, and you're not going to be able to see a comparison of this year to previous years. And that's all part of the
is that in part because of the Common Core?
The Common Core and the testing module that goes along with it.
Right.
It's a different form of testing, and so that's going to cause a new baseline to be established.
Okay, well, we're about ready to go to break, so we're going to do that. We want you all to come back. We're going to continue our discussion with Mr. Bill Ferris, and like I said, it's too bad he's such a novice, but we'll continue here. Join us when we come back. You're listening again to Ridgecrest Talk, Thursday night version, and we'll be back in just a few seconds.
Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Robert Eierman, along with Al Huey, and we're here this evening with the voice of experience of the Sierra Sands Unified School District, Mr. Bill Ferris.
Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us.
So when we left off, we were talking about some of the changes that have occurred most recently. Can you tell us anything about what's going on at the state level that's going to affect our local schools maybe down the road?
Well, a couple of things that are happening. Of course, with the new funding model that has come along, the local control funding formula, there are some factors in that make it kind of challenging. And basically, the concept behind the local control funding formula is to distribute the dollars to education differently based on more dollars for students who are more expensive to educate. And by that, they've identified three specific areas. The English language learners, the foster youth, and the economically disadvantaged. And so what happens is each district gets a base level funding, and then the extra dollars that were created by the proposition that we all voted for is then divided up based on the concentration of students that you have that are in those categories. That's kind of the first step, and it's a means to recognize that it is more expensive to educate those kids because their needs are greater, and so the state is trying to kind of equalize the playing field. In doing that, there's also an effort to make sure that local districts take those dollars as they receive them and put them to programs that are focused specifically on those students. There's also an element in the formula that requires local districts to have a significant amount of input in the budgeting process, in the determination of how to spend the dollars in the district, to make sure that it's reaching out to all the stakeholders and has complete community buy-in to where the dollars go. And the process then requires that as you spend the money, these additional funds, that you draw a correlation and essentially prove that where you're spending the dollars is on the kids that are generating the dollars, and then a subsequent proof that what you're doing is showing a benefit. And of course, in some districts, that's more obvious than others. In our district, of course, we don't have high concentrations of any of those populations, so we aren't receiving the kinds of increases in revenue that many districts in the state of California are. However, for what dollars we do get, we're still going to be required to do the same level of justification and research to determine where those dollars are spent, even though they're lesser amounts of money.
So again, it was for the second language people, the foster children,
foster
what
youth,
was the other one?
and the economically disadvantaged.
That seems like kind of the 1 over X approach as far as where the tax dollars are coming from. I know you had nothing to do with it, but those that are paying the taxes, for a better choice of words, normal, are paying their taxes for those who are not contributing as much in the way of tax dollars.
One could probably evaluate that to be the case. I think, though, in reality, there is a significant need to find a way to provide a positive, economically advantageous education to people who are not currently getting it. And there are some expenses that come with those challenges that districts have to face. And you know, if we're part of the issue here is we require schools to improve those kids' performances. And that's part of what all the testing is about, is to identify the kids who are not getting what they need and provide it for them. What this is really is the other end of that equation, and that says, well, if you're going to require this of schools, then you need to put your money where your mouth is. And because there are more significant needs,
Yeah,
and so
I can understand
so
that.
it's, you know, and it's certainly in this country we have a lot of systems whereby we kind of redistribute wealth, and to a great degree that's
that doesn't
kind
help
of
my wallet very much.
no.
So.
Well, and I guess the hope is in the long run it will affect everyone's economy to the positive.
Yeah,
by
hopefully.
bringing up the bottom, so that we can kind of overcome some of the challenges that we have in those areas.
Anything else going on that's going to affect things coming down from the state?
Another financial thing that's kind of a little bit worrisome to me is with the last approval of the last budget bill, there was a trailer that essentially puts into place the restriction of districts having carryover or limiting their
rainy day funds
or economic uncertainty funds. And the motivation for that is, with the new structure, the governor has established this state rainy day fund that dollars will flow to. And the theory there is that over the years in education, it's always been a struggle, because with few good years, the state will allocate a significant amount of dollars to education, and then there'll be a few bad years, and all of a sudden the bottom falls out, and so there's no equalization to our funding. And so this rainy day fund, it was a intent to kind of equalize the revenue stream to education. And
fortunately, we're going to have to go to break, but we'll pick this up when we come back, okay?
You bet. You bet.
Join us when we come back. You're listening to Ridgecrest Talk, Thursday night version with Al Huey and Robert Eierman. Welcome back to Ridgecrest Talk, the Thursday night version. Boy, we're messed up here tonight. I don't know what's going on.
We can't figure out.
It's not my fault.
Yeah, right.
I'll take the blame.
Thank you.
I don't have to be here next time, so.
We left off with Mr. Bill Ferris from the local school board, and you were talking about what some of the things coming down from the state on funding.
And we were talking about the funding and the restriction on the reserves. And basically the thought here from the perspective of the state is that by creating this rainy day fund, we shouldn't have in the future those dramatic spikes and lows in our funding model, and so therefore we shouldn't need to have as many dollars in reserve. The problem is, in my opinion, is the state has a long history of spending every dollar and then not being able to adjust or to compensate when there are changes in the revenue flow. And it appears to me that they're trying to force us to follow their model, which I don't think is a good model. I believe that local districts ought to be able to have the local control to determine for their district what makes the most sense for the money to hold in reserve, so that you can address the needs of education in your community. And those needs are not always consistent. There are some fluctuations and changes. There are also some significant investments that a district may need to want to make. And in order to do that, you need to grow a reserve so that when you then make that significant investment, you've got the dollars to do it. Of course, the opposing viewpoint is that there are some groups who believe, and as I believe in general, that money that you're given for education should go to educate the kids that you have now. You never have those kids back again. Those moments are now, and you lose them if you don't give them everything you have. And so I think it's a balancing act, because I do think you need to give them as much as you can, but you also need to plan with prudence, and you need to plan a long-term plan that gives you the ability to not be negatively impacted significantly when there is a fluctuation or when there is a specific need that's larger than you expected. And what that allows you to do is, if you have that long-term planning, it allows you to then address the needs of your students based on what you believe as a district is most important, and not just based on what you can through expediency cut because you only have a certain amount of time to do it. And so what happened in years past, and in many districts that I've seen, they reduce programs, they reduce services, not based on what they believe is the least impact on their students, but only based on what they have available to them legally to reduce, because they didn't have the time to plan. And that's why I believe that a district ought to be able to determine what level of reserve is appropriate for their community, and then take that long-term planning approach. In our district, in the most troublesome years we've had in the last few years, we've been able to weather the storm better than most anyone else around us.
Because of the rainy day funds.
Because of the fact that we built a prudent reserve, and because of the fact that it would give us an additional year to determine where those changes ought to be made in the next year's reduction in response. We made them. We made a lot of hard, tough cuts, but we made them in what was felt to be the least impact on the educational process for the kids, and that's the way it should be done. And so I believe taking that responsibility and that ability away from local districts is really a mistake.
I remember one pool of money that the district used to get. I don't know if they're still getting it. The Eierman Fund?
The Eierman Schools Financing Authority, yes.
Still getting that?
We are.
Okay.
It's not as large as it once was,
right,
but it is still an income stream that we have.
What do you see on the horizon for your local schools?
Well, an exciting thing on our horizon, of course, is our construction project that comes to us from the Department of Defense. A huge project will essentially build us a new Murray Middle School across from where Burroughs is now, as well as some dramatic enhancements to the Burroughs High School project. It's a very large project. It's unique to us. Because it's not just the typical state fund, so there are some challenges in reconciling the requirements of the state and the requirements of the federal government at the same time, and the federal government has some specific requirements on timelines that the state's not particularly good on timelines usually. So it's taking some specific attention, but I think it's really going to be a benefit to our community. For one thing, I think it'll be a very positive experience to bring another school off of the base and allow, as things have changed in our world here, the schools that we used to have on the base were surrounded by housing in the community, and now there's the housing in the community is no longer there,
right,
and so it's a transplant circumstance, and that's not a good situation, and it's difficult for parents to get to their kids. They've got to go through a process that gets more and more difficult all the time. And
so when is this scheduled to start and be completed?
We're working on all the preliminary kinds of studies, and the other day we approved a study that
we're going to have to cut this off right now.
Okay.
But we want to get you back
all
on.
right.
Okay.
You bet.
And we have some important election news I want to share with you real quick, and so you might want to mark your calendars. Both the Democratic Club of the High Desert and the Ridgecrest Republican Women Federated will be hosting candidate meet and greets. The Republican women will host their event on September 26th at noon. It's a luncheon. The cost is $15. For more information, contact Marlene Tracy at 760-608-3548. Also, the Democratic Club will host a dinner on October the 17th at Victoria's Restaurant beginning at 6 p.m. The cost of the dinner is $25, but the public can still attend if they choose not to purchase the dinner. Contact Matthew Alexander at 760-382-3871. And don't forget our candidate forums coming up next month. We're going to have 3 of those. October the 2nd, the mayoral, October the 9th, the city council, and October the 14th.
A Tuesday,
the school board. And those all begin at 6 p.m. So thank you for joining us tonight. Join us back here again next week for Thursday night version of Ridgecrest Talk.